Welcome to another wonderful edition here of Level Up Mental Health. Your host, Swizz. Got some good discussions here that we're going to be talking about as we proceed through our day here. The first we'll kind of dive into here is about post traumatic stress. So this is going to be more so of like psychoeducation, kind of understanding what is PTSD, and reviewing a few components associated with it, and then we'll be able to take a look at just kind of strategies or how we may respond to post-traumatic stress when we go through it. So as always, let's dive into that worksheet here. So here we go of just kind of looking at what post-traumatic stress is and how do we kind of consider a disorder. So one thing to emphasize as well too is that first and foremost, you can have post-traumatic stress and or let me back this up. You can have post-traumatic stress and for it not to be a disorder. Okay, so if you have a very traumatic event that happened to you, and you feel that it was damaging, hurtful, and then you might have just kind of some associated response from that event, maybe a singular time. We could say that that would be considered the post-traumatic stress. Now it becomes a disorder is when you feel that this particular event, for whatever it may be, or a combination, has disrupted your ability to kind of function. And especially you're having that overwhelming sense of heightened symptoms from the trauma that you had endured. So, post traumatic stress disorder is broken down into four particular clusters here. We have intrusive memories, we have avoidance, disassociation, hypervigilance. All are kind of in components with that. So the intrusive memories, such as the flashbacks, nightmares associated with that particular trauma. The avoidance, you don't want to be near that triggering event. Maybe if it happened and let's say if there was a difficult violent situation in an alleyway, you will want to avoid that alleyway. Disassociation, feeling like you're just kind of having this outer body experience and that the feeling isn't real. And then finally, hypervigilance, so feeling easily startled, feeling tense and trouble sleeping with the outbursts, for example, that may happen. So these symptoms can begin 3 months after the traumatic event, but sometimes they emerge later, and they can be accompanied with other things such as depression, substance use, all that are involved, right? Ultimately, again, you're experiencing a difficult trauma that is impacting your ability to manage this. So with these events as well too, you're going to be constantly feeling like you're reliving that particular event. The kind of the historical context of that is obviously related to the Vietnam War and the vets coming back and kind of experiencing the shell shock sort of symptoms in that sense, and further kind of fully understanding the impact that can have. But obviously it could be a variety of things that can occur, such as abuse, witnessing a traumatic event, being involved with it, even if it's like a natural disaster or involved with that. All are components associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. So what's interesting here is post-traumatic stress can also be defined through kind of like a secondary means. It's here they talk about kind of the big T versus little t in that sense as well, meaning what is the kind of the particular safety threats that you may have endured, whereas the little trauma are things such as a loss of a pet or relationship breakup. So I think what's important to recognize is that those events, those life events that occur, a death, a relationship breakup, those are considered traumatic events as well too. But if we're kind of focusing on the big events in that sense as well that we come to mind, a lot of that is related to the threats to safety. Even though they kind of differ from person to person, I cannot talk. Ultimately, what's important to emphasize is that the trauma that you've experienced is what's impacting you, right? So everyone's going to respond differently, and it's important to be, understanding and respectful for those experiences that they've gone through. One of the things I note too, it isn't mentioned in this worksheet, but I always like to emphasize that one of the things is that we can also experience trauma if we are not directly involved with it, right? So, like for example, I think this is what's kind of stating with the little trauma in that sense as well, but often can be considered as like a secondary trauma. So certain things like even, for example, like back to like 9/11, and if you were kind of witnessing that and seeing that happen, really again, kind of an event like that, you may have not been directly involved with that, but seeing it from afar and seeing it could have provided that traumatic response to that. So how do we handle it? What do we do? So the main kind of psychotherapy modalities includes the cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. Kind of those are really kind of important, and the exposure therapy as well. There's a particular technique called exposure and response prevention that really just kind of help be embedded in that is key. But through cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of us being unable to or able to understand our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Dialectical behavioral therapy is related to understanding our emotions and how they interact with others to kind of build those distress tolerances that we're experiencing. And the final one here is kind of the EMDR, which is a very kind of another common modality that can be used here, which really relates to being able to kind of triggered through that particular event and being able to kind of be exposed to those traumatic memories through the stimulation in that sense, right? Where kind of certain kind of exercises where that therapist is there and kind of processing what that trauma is like, and it's very specified for that as well too. Now, what's important to understand is that with PTSD, there can be some resiliency that may come from that, right? One thing that always has been shown to seen is that the higher resiliency that you've developed through a variety of factors, such as kind of your environment, your relationships, even genetics, all play in part in how you're able to kind of process and handle the trauma as well too. So ultimately, one's ability to kind of bounce back can be a lot harder for someone based on certain components that may not be involved, like we said, environment or relationships, things of that nature. So when you think about your resiliency, think about what components are associated with it, and think about if you experience a difficult situation, how does your resiliency kind of come about, right? How does it kind of, how are you able to persevere through something if you feel that, it's obviously, very detrimental to you? One of the things of note here, as we're kind of going through this, a lot of the time through the trauma response, is that we often resort to the fight or flight symptoms as well too. So we usually go through the kind of the main ones here. Like obviously we can identify the fight, the flight, the freeze, the submit. Are all kind of common here. And then there's the attach. So the fight is you're trying to actively battle against the pain that you may be experiencing. The flight is kind of running away. The avoidance, that's kind of where that is. The freeze is kind of like the deer in the headlights where you're experiencing that trauma. And these two other ones where you feel that may not correlate, or more of the kind of hidden ones, the submit and attach. Sometimes, submit can be often related to, submit and attach can often be related to like the term of like fawn and things of that. Feeling like where, especially for the attach of needing to have someone to save you, is key for that. And submitting is feeling, it's kind of related to freeze, but it's just like, you're just gonna, like, obviously submitting to the trauma that you're experiencing here. So these kind of components here, again, if you feel you're trying to understand how it may look, obviously with fight, there's anger, the self-destructive, needing control, the flight, kind of the runaway, ambivalent, the freeze, kind of not wanting to be seen, the depression, the shame from submit, the attach of desperate, needing connection, all are kind of components there for that. So yeah, it's good kind of education as you're kind of looking at if you feel there's any symptoms you may kind of run into. At the end of the day, though, that there is a lot of support. So if you feel you're looking to get treatment for PTSD, please reach out to a local provider to kind of work with that. And one thing of note too, as you had noticed that those different modalities are there, what's important is that those modalities are going to be, everyone's going to respond to them differently, right? So if you feel you've tried, let's say EDMR or EMDR and it didn't work, try exposure response. If you try to exposure response, try CBT and DBT, right? So make sure you're able to try those different approaches because you might be surprised about what may work for you. All right, that's all I got. I'll see you next video. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe. Thank you.